Coming up on this week's show, we say goodbye and good riddance to Internet Explorer.
An amazing new collection for Atari fans is coming.
And we get the inside story on the retro beat-em-up revival with Bitmap Bureau.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each and every week with our amazing friends at Bitmap Books. Now, obviously, this week we're talking a lot about side-scrolling beat-em-ups. One of their books you need to check out. It's new from them. Go Straight, the ultimate guide to side-scrolling beat-em-ups. This fascinating record of the genre's history is going to be right up your street of rage. You can check it out on the rest of their retro gaming books at bitmapbooks.com. And with our lovely friends at PCBWay. Now, if you're working on an electronics project at the moment, they offer a fully featured custom PCB prototype service with low-cost, fast turnaround quality boards, and they offer services like 3D printing and injection molding, and they're big supporters of the retro community. So get an instant quote for your project right now at PCBWay.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 332, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome to this week's podcast, where, of course, every Friday we take you on a journey inside the world of retro video games, bringing you up to speed on all the big stories that you need to know about from the last week. And we're joined by a veteran of the video games industry on each week's show. And hopefully, I'm not sounding too sleepy, because I did have a bit of a crazy weekend. Friday night, stayed up till around 3 o'clock in the morning playing the new Turtles game, Shredder's Revenge. And then Saturday night, I think I went to bed around 3:30 in the morning because I was playing another new retro beat-em-up game that we're going to be talking about this week. And that, of course, is Final Vendetta. I think a lot of people have been doing that this week, haven't they?
You're practically a teenager again, Dan.
I know. It's amazing.
living too hard there, Dan. But yeah, no, pretty much exactly the same as what I did all weekend as well. And all this week was, not going to lie, they're quite hard games. Not quite finished them just yet, which I'm ashamed to say with me being a beat 'em up connoisseur. But yeah, man, it was really, really great to have the Final Vendetta guys on today, and it was a little bit of a catch up actually because we've had Mike on before, haven't we?
Yeah, so this is Mike, who's the design director of Bitmap Bureau. Now, we did have Mike on, and Matt, I think this was, I looked and I thought it was about 2 years ago. Turns out it was January 2018.
Wow.
When we had Mike on, so yeah, nearly half a decade ago
and
now.
you know, they were working on like total different titles before, but they've grown so much. Like, I've not played Final Vendetta, but I've seen it absolutely everywhere. Like, my Twitter had screenshots of it, you know, YouTube, it was just reviews of it. It looks like it's really, really popular.
Well, they last time we had Mike on, it was when they just launched their Kickstarter for a game called Xenocrisis that was on the Mega Drive at the time, and obviously it's on a lot of different platforms now. Since then, they've released a Gauntlet-inspired game called Battle Axe. Again, that's a game they released on the Neo Geo, so they're really into doing not only games that you can play, kind of retro-inspired games on modern platforms, but they're like putting them out on the original hardware. So they've done games for Mega Drive, Dreamcast, Neo Geo now as well. So, you know, they're really doing a lot.
And they're working with, like, you know, a lot of people from the original games industry. Because I remember that Xenocrisis one. They were working with Henk Nyborg, who did the graphics and the original drawings and some beautiful stuff. Yeah, so really good to have them kind of doing the old school titles, but like having the old school people involved as well.
So yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking to Mike and also Lee Mintram, who's he's a very accomplished video games musician. He's done stuff like on the old school FIFA games. He had a track on Jet Set Radio as well. I know that soundtrack is right up your street, Ravi. And also he did, everyone remembers, you know, if you talk about Apple advertising, you remember the iPod advert with the dancing white silhouettes?
Oh yeah, that was iconic, wasn't it?
And that was kind of his big breakthrough. He actually did the soundtrack for that.
Oh, wow.
So we've got some great stories from Lee about, you know, them flying him out to Apple's HQ. And apparently Steve Jobs actually chose that song himself, you know, to have on the soundtrack. And kind of how he got involved in this project too, because some really interesting stories. But as I said, I mean, the fact that this new game, Final Vendetta, which for people that haven't played it, Joe and I, like I said, we spent a lot of time on it over the last few days. How would you describe it, Joe? It's kind of a love letter to those 90s beat-em-ups,
It's a real love letter to... It's a cross between like Streets of Rage 2 and 3 and Final Fight. that's kind of what they were going for, and Mike says that's what they were going for as well. And I've watched some really great reviews on it. GameSack, who we've had on before, they did a review of it, and I can't remember exactly what he called it, but he said they may as well just called it like Final Vendetta of Rage or something like that, which I thought was really good. But it's a real love letter, but then it's got that really nice Neo Geo style graphics, which they purposely went for, and it just looks like a really nice 32-bit 2D game. But I must admit, it is brutally hard, and we spoke about that as well on the show, but they kind of purposely did that because they wanted it to have that old school retro hardness to it. And me and you, we've not been doing too good on it. I think I got to the fourth boss. I think
you did better than me, I think.
Yeah, you got to the second level on it. But, it's all been done very purposefully. And it's to kind of learn the game because it's a little bit different. You can roll in it. You can dash up and down. You can block. And a lot of these kind of retro games, retro beat-em-ups have those elements. But I've not really played one where it does all of those elements at once. And it was just really great kind of talking about like how there's been a real revival of beat 'em up games, in the last couple of years with Streets of Rage 4 and obviously Shredder's Revenge and stuff like that. So I was right in my element. I really loved it.
One thing that stood out for me was the soundtrack. When I saw the trailers, it was absolutely banging. And like, I've got the Streets of Rage soundtrack here on vinyl. Like, I'd love to get this one. It sounds awesome.
It is coming on vinyl, and Lee was saying, I don't want to spoil it too much, but he did about 40 tracks for it, and I think 30 of them made it onto the game in the end, which is just really awesome, and we hear all about like how he started out on the Amiga and his love for the Atari ST, or should I say not his love for the Atari ST.
Yeah, because Micah, we've got on, is a big Atari ST fan, so there's a little bit of hostility at the start, but we get over that pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, it is incredible. And actually, talking to the soundtrack again, that was just such a big standout on games like Streets of Rage, wasn't it?
Those
so
early
90s soundtracks. Oh, yeah, exactly. And Utah Saints, who we've had on this show before, actually involved in the soundtrack as well with Lee. So it's such, like you said, if you love those games. And it's very difficult, but I think a lot of modern games, probably hold your hand a bit too much these days. So in a way, it was quite refreshing to see a game that completely whipped my ass and didn't hold my hand too much while I was playing.
Here's a question. Was there any Kate Bush involved with the Utah Saints around,
There's an idea, yeah. She's very on trend again now, isn't she, Kate Bush? So if you're loving the retro beat 'em up revival, Final Vendetta, the new game that just dropped this week on all the major platforms, and is coming to the Neo Geo very soon as well. So we'll hear more about that with our special guests, Mike and Lee from Bitmap Bureau, are coming up on the show in around 25 minutes from now. Now, lots of other stories to get into this week. First of all, this is never something that we like to see. A game that's come back from the past and been brought to modern systems, but unfortunately has got a game-breaking bug. And this seems to be something that's happening quite regularly these days.
It's pretty mad having games released that kind of break and just relying on that update to kind of get fired down the line and fix a game. I always think about these people. Maybe there's someone out there who isn't connected online and buys the game and then could never get these updates and get the broken version. Well, the game in question is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, which, I don't know, Joe, have you played Knights of the Old Republic? It was a pretty decent game.
I'm ashamed to say I haven't played the Knights of the Old Republic games, and I know there's a lot of hype about these games, and, they're meant to be like quintessential Star Wars games. I've played them very briefly on LAN multiplayer, at like Play Expo.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell on like Deathmatch, but I couldn't tell you which one I was playing. But I know that those must check out like Star Wars games.
But there was a great set of Star Wars games that came out, and they were for the PC as well, and they all ran on this engine, and the way that it ran was like, it was kind of RPG, but also, you'd be behind the character. I think, is it fourth person or
third person?
Third person, yeah. So it wouldn't be like an FPS, but you'd be kind of going around these environments, and it was all based on the same engine. And there was a really great series that came out, and it was around 2004, came out on the Xbox and the PC. Well, it's been released on the Switch, and Aspire, the company that's released it, have found out that on this level, which is where the Basilisk crash cutscene happens on landing on Onderon. I hope I've said that correctly.
Onderon, yeah.
Yeah, there's basically a crash in the Switch version, and at the moment, this is like June the 20th that they posted this. They're saying that they haven't actually got a fix for it.
Oh, wow.
So they're waiting to, fix it and then release it later on. But if you've got that title, you can probably only make it up to that section.
That blows my mind that can even get through testing, because surely you're going to get some testers to play the game all the way through before you release it, you'd think.
You'd think, wouldn't you?
Apparently not, yeah, which is just insane.
And this is like a Switch release, and it's like, it's Star Wars. It's quite a big brand. It's not, your kind of PD game or anything like that. So pretty amazing to see. And it's just amazing that the public have found this bug rather than someone internally, like you say.
Well, I think these days, I'm not accusing them of doing it with this game, but a lot of the time I think they just kind of shove a game out there, maybe with minimal testing, and be like, oh, if there's any problems arise, we can just patch it, like you said. But then, there are going to be people that haven't got internet connectivity while they're playing it. I just come back from a couple of weeks on holiday in Turkey, and that was a 4.5 hour flight, and I was playing my Switch on the plane all the way there and all the way back. So that was like 9 hours when I wasn't online. And if I was playing this game and I got to that point, then that's going to ruin your experience, isn't it?
Yeah, like we've seen it, and it damages reputations of releases. Like, I don't think it's a majorly wise thing to do for a company. Just spend a little bit more on testers, because GTA, the remastered one, that came out, and it was all over the news that it was broken. Obviously they've fixed it, but you just avoid that whole kind of nonsense, and people, then it kind of stains the reputation of the release a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's hard to recover from that, isn't it, once those bad reviews are out there?
Yeah, I guess it's like the kind of crunch culture and just get it out there, and probably management pushing it, where, devs have maybe said, we need a bit more testing. No, release it, we'll just update it,
Well, I must admit, I didn't play the original game, but I'm looking at some, there's an article on IGN that actually embeds a side-by-side comparison with the original Xbox and the Switch. Graphics are a little bit sharper, but actually bizarrely, like the Xbox in some places seems to run at a smoother frame rate as well, and actually is a bit ahead of the Switch version of the game, which seems to me like, 20 years later, that's probably not something that should happen.
Yeah, you'd think they'd be going for like a remaster, or they'd be going for, like a bit of an improvement on the Switch. But yeah, that's pretty odd.
Yeah, but they have said, like you mentioned, Ravi, that they've identified that there is a problem with it, and the same. They are going to do a patch. Unfortunately, at the time of recording, isn't available yet. But if you have got that game and you come up against that, hopefully Aspire are going to get that problem sorted out for you soon. Look out for an update coming down. Now, when we talk about Atari over the last couple of years, generally it's because they've done something a little bit insane, you could say. Whether it's starting their own cryptocurrency or building a hotel chain. They've been up to quite a bit of interesting things over the last few years. And then, of course, we had the new Atari console, which I've had in my cupboard for about a year.
I was going to say, it's not got pride of place in your gaming collection, has it?
It's his main console.
I think I've played it once, I think. Well, I actually did think of bringing it in my studio room I've got here and using it as a PC. Because actually you can run, like Windows 11 on there and stuff. The only thing is it's got a really loud, annoying fan that ramps up every time you move your mouse. So even for that, it's not the best hardware for, any use case where you don't want a fan blaring in your face. But this actually looks like Atari could be doing something that looks pretty decent. Now, this is something that's coming out this summer, a collection of minigames called Atari Mania. And a lot of people are kind of comparing this to a WarioWare mashup of early Atari games.
Yeah, I on the Wii, we have like on the Wii U as well, like there's Wii Party and stuff, but there's also like the WarioWare where you're playing different levels of different games. I'm sure there's another one as well, but you play like Nintendo classics, but it's like tiny sections of it. So it'll be like you've got to quickly just complete this section of Donkey Kong, and then you get chucked onto another game and stuff. And I think it's quite a good concept actually, like breaking up the old traditional game. So how are they doing it here?
Well, this is going to be a release for the PC initially. It's going to be a collection. Oh, is it coming out? Is it actually coming out of the VCS?
It says it. If you go on their official page, it says coming soon to Steam and Atari VCS. There you go.
Dust it off, Dan.
There's a reason to buy a VCS. So, this is Atari Mania, a collection, the promising, of more than 150 mini games that's coming out. And it's going to be, like you said, just small bits of games. I mean, there is an announcement trailer that shows you a bit of the footage. It's only about a minute long, but you can see stuff in there like there's Yar's Revenge, a little bit of Breakout in there as well, Adventure, all kind of in, modern, updated, pixelated retro graphics style.
Yeah, it looks very indie gamey, doesn't it? It's like indie game kind of chunky pixel versions of the games. Yeah,
it's kind of a mashup of all those classic games as well. I mean, they mentioned here in the article on Polygon that, in one section of it, it looks like you use a pong paddle to fight off the bugs from Centipede.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, it's kind of, mashing up all of these classic games, more than 150 of them, micro games are calling them actually, in this collection. So I think it's an interesting way to kind of repurpose and present these games again for a different audience. Because, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. I mean, it does get to a stage where even someone like me who, the Atari VCS, I've got one, but I'm not really that into its catalogue. It hasn't really got much nostalgia for me, and it was a bit before my time. And the games are very simplistic these days. But I think it is something that even though I'm not a huge fan of those games, I've got them on so many different systems, whether it be, compilations that I've just acquired over the years. And it gets to a stage where you don't want to buy the same thing over and over again. So I think having something like this, it kind of presents it in a new format, is definitely a good thing.
And it's quite innovative because, so like last week, we were talking about this kind of, you're a caretaker of an arcade and it's haunted and you've kind of got to keep going. This one, you're a caretaker of the Atari Vault, and it's like a storehouse of all the classic games. And then one night a dead pixel appears, and soon enough, all heck breaks loose. So I think this job of being a caretaker of an arcade or something, it's a pretty good job, man. If there's any going, I'd love to have it.
Sounds terrifying.
Sounds exciting, yeah.
I think they're missing a trick with it. Maybe it will do eventually, but I think they're missing a trick with it not coming to the Switch. Like, it seems perfect for the Switch.
Yeah, definitely.
But they're opting for the VCS instead, keeping it in house.
And I'm looking at the comments on the video on Atari's official YouTube channel, and they are saying they're hoping that they're going to get this out on PS5 and Switch as well. So it could be something that comes later down the line by the looks of it.
So is this going to be the VCS's killer app then? I guess it's
not if it's coming out on the Switch.
Yeah, it's not exclusive. So
yeah, so it's it is cool to see Atari finally doing something that I think people are interested in. It's something different and looking at the comments, people seem to be quite hyped for it as well. So it's nice to see them doing something that we'd expect Atari to do, not setting up hotels. So if you want to check out the trailer, I'll link it up in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, of course, it does seem like this retro FPS revival continues, and also the trend of finding prototype games that never were for the Game Boy Advance. I think we've mentioned one every show now for the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
But this one is an unreleased Quake prototype that's been discovered for the GBA.
It looks very cool. I mean, it comes from Forest of Illusion, who I think we mention every week at the moment as well. They're finding all these games and restoring them and dumping them and uploading them and stuff like that. But I think it looks really cool. So yeah, Quake on the Game Boy Advance, which was developed right at the back end of the Game Boy Advance, apparently, but obviously never came out. But it's by Randy Linden.
Yeah, we've had him on the show.
We've had him on, haven't we? Obviously, the creator of Bleem, and then also did the SNES port of Doom as well. So I guess this is quite familiar territory for him, because obviously the Game Boy Advance, I mean, I'm obviously no programmer or anything like that, but it was always kind of seen as a portable SNES. So I guess, and obviously Quake and Doom aren't a million miles away from each other. So I guess it kind of made sense for them to try and put Quake on the Game Boy Advance. But interestingly, this version of it that they've got a hold of, it doesn't actually have any of the assets from Quake. He completely built it from the ground up, apparently. Obviously we don't know what the story is. It never came out. But it's pretty impressive that it's on the GBA. So
MVG has done a really good video of it that I checked out. And Randy's an insane programmer. He's the kind of guy that does the impossible. He did Bleem, which was the emulator for Dreamcast, which did PlayStation stuff. So the way that this works is, Quake, the source code's been kind of released the same as Doom, and lots of people modify it and stuff. And it's like Doom. It's like a virus. It goes onto loads of systems.
Yeah.
The way that it works is it's been done in assembly code, assembler, and very much like the Tomb Raider port that we saw, it stores RAM in all the different places very intelligently. All the different places on the Game Boy Advance, usually like external RAM, virtual RAM, stuff like that. And he's worked out a way of storing all the 3D processing in this RAM and like the 3D tables. So it basically runs kind of well on the Game Boy, like the best you're going to get.
I think it looks really nice.
Yeah.
If watching the video, there's a video of it that'll embed that's on Nintendo Life. The frame rate looks really smooth. Yeah. Mind-blowingly so for the Game Boy Advance. Yeah,
definitely. And you think how kind of small and like limited it was, and it's a good achievement. Like I'd be impressed with seeing Doom running, but Quake, it's like, my God.
Doom did come out on the GBA, I must say.
Yeah, was it a good port?
I have not played it since I was about 12 because I had it, but I thought it was a good port at the time, so don't take my word for it. But I don't remember it being as smooth as this Quake port.
This is running better than some of the Amiga Quake ports that I've seen back in the days. Yeah, it's really nice, and I'm just amazed that this kind of having 3D game, having Tomb Raider, having like Quake on there. It's pretty impressive for such a small system.
And you think, when I saw Doom running on the Super Nintendo, and that to me was pushing the boundaries of that hardware, and Quake, you kind of mentioned that it's not too dissimilar to Doom, Joe, but I remember a lot of people that would be kind of the instigator for them to move from a 486 PC to a Pentium.
Yeah.
Because you needed that extra grunt. And then when those, initial 3D graphics cards or the 3D accelerators came along, stuff like the Voodoo cards and stuff, that would be a reason that people would go out and they'd spend like, $200 or $300, £400 on an accelerator board just to play Quake. Because it was, I played the original quite recently on a Pentium 1, and you've got stuff in there like even the fact that you can look up and you can see the sky kind of rolling by.
Yeah, and there's like slopes, and there's like everything's textured, there's not a section that's missing it, and it's got like dynamic lighting and particles and stuff like that. It's very impressive. Yeah.
Yes, it might not look like much today, but I think coming from those huge jumps between Wolfenstein 3D, Doom and Quake, they felt like different generations, really, didn't they? So the fact that it is running at all, I know this is not really a port of Quake, it's more like a reinterpretation of it. But even in this demo, you can watch like 3 minutes of footage on YouTube, or I'll embed MVG's link as well, if you want to hear a bit more about it. But yeah, you've got all those slopes in there and, jumping and stuff like that, which was very difficult to do. I think sometimes we forget just kind of what technical achievements they were back then. So the fact that this runs even at all on a Game Boy Advance, which, as you said, in terms of hardware, not a million miles from a Super Nintendo, I think it's just jaw-dropping.
Yeah, and like I think every piece of work that I've seen from Randy is like just mind-bending. Like this just adds to it,
Yeah, so if you want to check out that video, I'll put MVG's video and also the little 3-minute gameplay footage, and also the download link. If you've got an EverDrive for your Game Boy Advance, you can play it actually from Forest of Illusion's website. You'll find all that in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, of course, it is the final weekend of June coming up, which blows my mind. This month's gone so quickly. But it is our favourite weekend of the month because something big coming up on Sunday evening. Joe, you know what weekend it is?
There's a couple of things coming up. It is the Patrons Hangout. There you go. You can record that as well. You can use it like you do the the Hall of Fame.
But, that the jingle, is it?
Yeah, it's the Patrons Hangout this Sunday. Which will be 8 till 10, won't it? Where we'll be talking all things retro, talking all things what we've bought in the last month as well. But as well as that, we're also going to be doing our next episode of the Retro Hour After Hours, aren't we? Where I think we're going to be covering the retro years 1989. We're going to do.
Wow. 89, what a year.
I know, what a year. It was the year, Handsome Joe was born. So, it was the month and year he was born. There you go. So that's what.
So modest as well.
So yeah, I know. So humble. So that's why we're going to be covering that. But obviously, the reason we do all these things is really to keep the show independent and keep the running of the show. And obviously, to kind of say thank you for all the patrons who allow that to kind of happen, isn't it?
That's the thing, because this podcast, I mean, we haven't got any big company behind us. You know, we're amateur, really. It's three guys in our house who love video games, who just want to come and talk and chat to people that, you know, we grew up playing these people's games. And, you know, to us, it's just a passion project, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
To try and find out more.
And getting guests every single week. And, you know, it does take up time, and it really helps having the Patreon, you know, just to kind of take that pressure off, and also help us get equipment, like pay for the website as well. And just you guys also, you're great supports for the podcast, and you even like provide news for us in the Discord as well, which is fantastic, and get involved with the show.
Yeah, so we love our community. And if you'd like to join it as well, I mean, you know, for a couple of pounds, couple of euros, couple of dollars a month, that's all it takes. You can join our community as well. Support the show. Think of it as a little tip jar if you enjoy what we do. And of course, for backing us on Patreon, you will find your place in the most prestigious high score table in the world of retro gaming, and that is
Hall of Fame,
the Retro Hour Hall of Fame. And a big thank you to our latest supporters. That is Joe Douglas,
Ricky Sickenger,
and Aidan Holmes,
who all backed us on Patreon. We massively appreciate your support. And if you'd like to find your place in the Hall of Fame and back us on Patreon, you'll find all the details at theretrohour.com. Now, it has been a week when this story's been all over the place. It's always interesting when you see retro technology stories being, you know, reported on the BBC and on ITV News as well. And even your mum talking about it, that she's read it in a magazine. And that is the Internet Explorer has finally been killed off this week.
Yes.
And a lot of people have been marking the end of Internet Explorer in various ways.
God, I'm so happy that it's finished. For so many years, Microsoft tried to... Well, let's talk about the history for a bit. So Internet Explorer was the first kind of browser that was added to an operating system, and that caused a massive monopoly court case with Microsoft years ago, because Netscape Navigator was out, Mosaic was out as well, and they basically killed the whole kind of model. Like, Netscape Navigator was paid for as well, but by adding Internet Explorer in with the operating system Windows, it ended up becoming a monopoly, because, you know, that was the default. People would just use that straight away. And it did kill the model of Netscape Navigator, which eventually turned into Mozilla. And then that became Firefox. But Internet Explorer, I used it. It helped me get into the internet. Everybody used it. You had to use it. You were forced to by standard. But it was so weird and custom that you had to... I was a web coder, and you had to create specific rules for Internet Explorer so that it would display in that way. And it was interesting. It was that whole kind of Windows and MSM network and all becoming part of it, you know. And Internet Explorer for years was the default, and then it ended up kind of trying to be hidden by Microsoft. So even if you got the latest operating system, you'd have Edge, and you'd have Internet Explorer like hidden somewhere in the system as well. And they always tried to kind of change it because it got such a bad reputation over time.
It's interesting because I was a Netscape user, and I browsed on the Amiga, like the original two web browsers that I used. But then, like you said, you know, when IE kind of got bundled, it kind of felt like that they did stuff like, you know, their own kind of HTML standards and JavaScript. I think they put their own stuff in there. And there's ActiveX, all of those technologies as well. But I remember Netscape really dropping the ball when I think it was, you know, Netscape 4 came out. And then it went from being like quite a minimal, lightweight browser to, you remember that the communicator suite?
Yes, yeah.
When it tried to do everything, didn't it? And I remember then thinking when that came out, my God, this is bloatware. And actually I did use Internet Explorer for a while.
Well, you had to, because stuff like Shockwave was, you know, worked, a lot of the web applets, a lot of JavaScript, you know, Internet Explorer supported a lot of things that actually now aren't much of a standard. Like, do you remember Silverlight as well? I think that was one at one point. There were so many kind of external things that worked well with it. And it's weird because I hated it, but it was also my gateway to the internet and the kind of online world. So I kind of hate it and love it. You know what I mean? I'm in a weird relationship with Internet Explorer.
I think a lot of people did. And I think, you can probably thank Internet Explorer, as awful as it was in most releases, and the fact that no one really had much love for IE, it probably did do a lot to get kind of normal people online. Because you can think of now that model of Netscape actually selling a web browser. Can you imagine going out and paying 30, 40, 50 quid for a web browser today? Unthinkable.
Yeah.
But that's thanks
totally.
to what Internet Explorer
and you would feel totally ripped off if you had paid 30, 40 quid and then something came out for free, wouldn't you?
But like you said, the fact that Microsoft kind of broke standards and stuff, and there was that court case as well. Even though I think Netscape kind of shot themselves in the foot by, turning into bloatware in the end.
Yeah.
It can't be denied that IE did a lot of bad as well. So it's no surprise to see that there have been, quite a lot of memes and people posting things all over Twitter this week. One that I love, I think this is in Malaysia actually. Someone's actually made a real life tombstone for Internet Explorer. So there's a headstone there with the IE logo on. The date's on there, 1995 to 2022. And the inscription at the bottom says, "He was a good tool to download other browsers," which I think was really all anyone used Internet Explorer for the last 20 years or so, wasn't it?
Yeah. There was a kind of use of that. But yeah, like I said, stuff like Real Player and stuff, it really did open up the world. And if you're a Mac user, I guess you were totally on Safari or something then.
Well, no,
Wasn't
Internet Explorer was the default
was
browser
that still
on the Mac
as well. God, yeah.
It was, yeah. Well, when Microsoft did that big investment in Apple, you remember in the late 90s?
Oh, yeah.
97, that was the announcement that IE
I didn't
was the
use a
default
Mac
bundle browser.
till later on. I do remember now you mentioned that there was an Internet Explorer on Mac. God,
and it was terrible.
Took over the world, didn't it?
That is the only time I've ever seen Steve Jobs get booed on stage. So, I'll put that video if I can find it on YouTube in our show notes as well. One thing that I thought was interesting is there is an official Microsoft Edge Twitter account. And did you see their tribute to Internet Explorer last week?
Yeah, that was really weird. I saw it and it was like, wait a minute, they've got Internet Explorer on a CRT monitor, but also on what looks like an Amiga 1000. With the badges removed. And it's like, yeah, that was never on the Amiga 1000, ever.
You know what, though? Because that image, now, this has been all over Twitter. Yeah, this is on Microsoft Edge's official account. It says, to our predecessor, you helped the world explore the internet along with every facet of life. Now it's time to surf the big web in the sky. And there is a picture of the IE icon, full screen, on what appears to be an Amiga 1000. And as you can imagine, the Amiga fans found this. All the replies, if you go through, there's hundreds of them, just ripping into Microsoft for this. And I've actually seen that image of the Amiga 1000 before. I think it's on something like ThinkStock or iStock. If you search for retro PC, that image comes up. So what I think's happened here is it's probably some 19, 20-year-old who works at Microsoft who does graphic design for them. They've probably just done that, gone on ThinkStock and gone old computer, found that not knowing what it was, and just kind of put that logo on the screen. That's what I suspect.
I think it's a nice way to market, something completely wrong and broken at the very end, kind of adds to the legacy. It's at least they're still messing it up.
Yeah, so that's got the more, I think, attention than anything else, actually having that running on an Amiga screen. I don't think the tweet would have blown up quite as well as it did, so maybe it was intentional. You never know. But there you go. So Internet Explorer officially is no more, although I can't remember the last time I actually opened IE, probably around 12, 13 years ago.
This is my prediction. In a year, people are going to be walking around in Primark in Internet Explorer tops and tracksuits, and I'm sure they're going to use the brand and the logo for a long time, and it'll become a fashion icon.
If Stranger Things makes it to 1995, that's when Internet Explorer will be cool again. You just watch. So there you go. If you want to read more about the memories of Internet Explorer, a couple of cool videos have come out this week as well, so I'll show a few of those in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Right, we'll wake Joe up now from being too much computer nerdy talk for him.
I've been awake.
Now, this is one more story we'll squeeze in before we get into our chat this week. Kind of follows on quite nicely from the episode we did recently with Randy Breen, where we're talking about Fade to Black, which was a successor to one of my all-time favourite games, Flashback, that came out on PS1 and the PC back in the mid-90s. Quite weirdly, as soon as that episode dropped, this totally went under the radar for me. And actually, bizarrely, I thought this would have been bigger news than it turns out to be. So I don't know about you guys, I haven't seen this anywhere, but this was actually announced last week, and there's a little teaser video as well, that Flashback 2, a sequel from long-established French studio Microids, is apparently going to be coming out a little bit later on this year, and that is to mark the 30th anniversary of Flashback 2. Now, we did say that this announcement was originally kind of mentioned or rumoured back in 2021. When I heard that, I thought, did we talk about this on the podcast or not? But I don't remember ever chatting about this. But there is a short 58-second trailer that they've uploaded to YouTube that kind of gives us a little glimpse into the sequel to Flashback. Now, this one looks a lot more in the vein of the original game than something like Fade to Black that was a 3D game.
Yeah, you're the big in-house Flashback fan, aren't you? What do you think of this? And like, I've noticed there's different sections in it. So there's like driving sections and zip lines and all kinds of stuff in this trailer. It looks interesting. What do you think, Dan and Joe?
I don't know if did you guys ever play Flashback originally?
Yeah, I've played Flashback for the Mega Drive, and then I have actually played Fade to Black for the PS1 as well. I could have sworn there was about 10 years ago, like, or maybe not that long ago, there was an updated version of Flashback for like Xbox.
Yeah,
or
the HD remaster.
Yeah,
and it was terrible.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I
dreadful.
remember playing that one. I don't remember it being very good. But I've always enjoyed these games. You know, I don't know the style of the game, but you know, the Prince of Persia and Another World and all that kind of stuff. I've always really enjoyed these kind of games, but I don't know if they've kind of captured that from looking at the trailer. I mean, like you say, it's only a 58-second trailer. I don't know if they've captured that feel as well. It looks a little bit, and it's going to sound really stupid, but it looks a little bit too smooth for Flashback. You know, these kind of games, I always associate them with being quite slow and methodical, and you have to really think about. Essentially, I kind of play them as like a puzzler, if that makes sense. Like, you know, like Abe's Odyssey and stuff. Like, okay, you're going to take 3 steps forward, then you're going to duck, and then you're going to jump, and then you're going to shoot, and then you're going to roll. Like, I really like that methodical kind of ness of them. Whereas this, I don't know, like I say, it's a 58-second trailer. And in the trailer, you can't actually see the gameplay perfectly because it's all kind of like being projected out of like a device, isn't it? Like,
the holocube.
Yeah, the holocube. And it just looks a little bit too fast and smooth for me for Flashback. But I don't know, you know, I've not played the game. You know, I obviously none of us have played the game yet. I don't have a feel for it yet. But that's my concern about it. But, you know, what do you think, Dan? You're the big Flashback
I agree. I mean, I think this looks like a very pacey, side-scrolling action shooter game, doesn't it? But the original Flashback, you're right, there's a lot of puzzle elements in there. The fact that you've got to find, you know, keys for switches, and there's a lot of that kind of meticulous timing that you've got to do. You know, you might throw a rock to activate a switch, and then an enemy would turn away, and you've got a time, you know, getting your gun out and rolling down and standing up and shooting them.
Yeah.
At the right time. And so there was a lot of that in the original game. Yeah, it does look, I mean, like I said, there's only less than a minute of footage here, but there's not much pausing in here. You know, just feel like he's just going through
just legging it
and kind of blasting everything in sight.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting. It kind of makes me wonder as well where, like, Fade to Black, you know, now appears in the timeline, whether they're just going to kind of forget that kind of element of the story and this is just going to be a sequel to the first game. But apparently Paul Quissett, who was, you know, the original creator of Flashback, is involved in this as well.
Wasn't
you know,
there,
in terms of the story.
Wasn't there like an element, I remember, where you had to chuck stones at things and stuff?
Yeah, you would, to open doors and generally to activate things. Weirdly, it's not the only Flashback thing I've seen this week. I mean, talking about, you know, again, Game Boy Advance footage. I was watching a video the other day that an unreleased version of Flashback that was going to come out on the Game Boy Advance in around 2002 that looked very similar to the original, only really colourful.
All right.
It's bizarre. You can actually find that on YouTube. There's kind of loads of, like, you know, bright yellow plants and everything in the first level, and it looks really bizarre. But it just kind of feel like, Flashback, really a franchise that, apart from that dreadful 2013 re-release, has kind of been dormant since the mid-90s. So it just kind of feel like it's the right time to kind of maybe do a proper sequel to it. But again, it's just a game that's very much, like I said, there's a lot goes into it. It's not just a typical kind of blast everything on the screen kind of game. So I hope, having Paul involved, I mean, the guy who made the game originally, you think that he would understand the atmosphere and logistics of what goes into a good flashback game.
And a French company as well, kind of sticking to its roots. They're missing a trick here, not calling it flashbacked, though. Like,
Flashback.
Yeah.
Flashback to the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, again, I love that game, so it is something I'll be checking out, absolutely. Hoping it doesn't disappoint, like, the Flashback remake that we got in 2013. Maybe it means that fans can just completely forget that ever happened if this new version's good. So we'll keep an eye on that. It's meant to be out in winter this year, so hopefully not too long to wait. Now, before we chat to this week's special guest, just a quick reminder, a little bit of housekeeping. I think, it's always important to just give a little mention to now and then, because we do have a Discord. And I've noticed people in there have been sharing news stories and stuff. A lot of people actually email us, how do I get news to you guys? Discord's a really good way of doing that, isn't it?
Yeah, Discord's like a wicked community. It's very nice. It's like IRC mixed with a forum, mixed with a kind of direct messaging system. I really love Discord. It's like my main kind of social network that I actually use. And we've got a server on there. We've got the invite on the website as well. Some great stuff. You can even do self-promotion if you're streaming and you want people to view what you're up to, chat about retro news, suggest guests, chat about the latest episode as well. So definitely check us out on Discord, because it's a lovely little community going on there.
Yeah, and a good way to get hold of us guys as well, because generally I'm lurking in there. Ravi, you check quite a bit in there too.
Yeah,
so
you can add
if you want to kind of get a message through.
We'll be able to reply, and get notified that you've talked to us,
Absolutely. And I want to say a huge thank you to Dan770 and The Real Force, who left us a couple of reviews on Apple Podcast as well. Nice left 5-star reviews. We'd really appreciate that. If you enjoy what we do, another really simple way to support the show, pop onto your podcast client of choice, leave us a little 5-star rating on there, a little nice review. Always helps us get in front of new people as well. So we massively appreciate those. Please keep them coming in. And right now then, time to talk about this incredible new retro-inspired beat-em-up game with our friends from Bitmap Bureau. We're going to get the story of Final Vendetta next on the Retro Hour podcast. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time for the main event then, when we welcome on our very special guest. And actually, really timely, because everyone's been talking about this incredible new retro-style beat-em-up game from our friends at Bitmap Bureau, Final Vendetta. So thought we'd get the team on, some of the team at least, to give us a bit of an insight into what goes into making a modern retro-inspired beat-em-up game, and a bit of a catch-up as well. So let's welcome on Mike Tucker and Lee Mintram. How you doing, Mike?
Hey guys, I'm good. Great to be back. Yeah, it's been a hectic few days, but I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, it's been a few years since we last spoke, so yeah, thanks for having us back.
Yeah, because you are the design director at Bitmap Bureau, and we actually had you on. We thought it was maybe 18 months ago. January 2018. Yeah. Last time we had you on this podcast, which is insane that it's over 4 years ago now.
That's mad. Yeah, it's like when you're making a game, a couple of years just flies by. But since then we did Battle Axe, and of course Xenocrisis went really well for us, and we've expanded the studio since then. And we thought we'd have a go at making a beat 'em up for a bit of fun.
And we're joined by Lee Mintram as well. Now, Lee, I know you're a long-time friend of the podcast. We've been talking for many years.
I am, yes.
And a very accomplished video game musician as well. So I'm looking forward to finding out a bit about what goes into, making audio for these kind of games. So it's nice to have you on, Lee.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for having us on, guys. I really appreciate it.
So let's start with a bit of a catch-up then, Mike. I mean, like you said, you're working on Xenocrisis last time we talked. I think the Kickstarter had just launched, and then you kind of, were promoting it as a new Mega Drive game as well. So in that kind of 4.5 years, I mean, how Bitmap Bureau kind of got on then? Have you kind of grown in size? How the project's been going, and kind of what have you been up to then in the last, nearly half a decade since we spoke?
We've been very busy with various projects, really. But Xenocrisis went down really well. And my colleague, Matt, he's been busy porting it to various platforms, including the Neo Geo systems, the Dreamcast, of course. And after that, we thought we'd continue to work with Henk Nieborg, the amazing pixel artist from the Amiga days. And he had a project called Battle Axe that he wanted to make. So we thought that let's team up again, and we had a Kickstarter for that went very well, and managed to publish that through Numbskull Games. and we're looking to bring that to Neo Geo as well. It's quite a demanding title technically, so it's going to take us a while. But in the meantime, we've been making this beat 'em up called Final Vendetta, which is also targeting Neo Geo, but modern platforms as well. And yeah, the studio's been doing great. We've expanded quite considerably. I think we're up to about 8 full-time staff now, and we work with various other artists around the world, and Lee down the road. And yeah, I couldn't be happier really. It's all going very nicely, and yeah, we've got also a couple of very big titles in production as well. So all good here. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned about Battle Axe then as well. I mean, that was, for people that missed that was a Gauntlet-inspired game, wasn't it? What was kind of the story with that? Just nice to find out a bit about Battle Axe.
I noticed that Henk had some mock-ups on Twitter for this top-down action kind of adventure game. I think it was called Battle Bash at the time. But yeah, after Xenocrisis, yeah, we needed to get stuck into another project, and I thought that would be perfect, really. So, and yeah, Henk was, of course, very keen. So, yeah, we launched a Kickstarter, and then Numskull came and spoke to us as well, and they provided some financial backing and the usual sort of publisher support. So, yeah, it was a real fun title that combined elements of Golden Axe, Gauntlet, probably Knights of the Round, if you know that, by Capcom.
It kind of reminds me of Story of 4 for the Mega Drive as well. Battle Axe.
Oh, yes, exactly. Yeah, we had a good look at that.
Yeah.
It's a very it's a gorgeous game. I think it's by Ancient.
Yeah.
I think Yuzo Koshiro did the music. So yeah, very much in a similar vein. That was a bit more sort of action RPG, but this is pure arcade action, really. And yeah, it's it kind of builds on Xenocrisis in a way because it's top-down kind of shooting and melee combat again. But yeah, it was a real showcase for Henk Nieborg's incredible art. And luckily, we were able to team up with the ex-Capcom musician Manami Matsume, who weirdly worked on Final Fight and Knights of the Round, Area 88, and Mega Man, games like that. So yeah, that was a real honour. And now we're working with Lee instead, which is just as exciting.
You're stuck with me now.
Fantastic. Well, Lee, give us a bit of a background. You know, how did you get started in making music on computers? Because I know you were a big Amiga fan.
Yeah. So I kind of had the Amiga back in the 90s. I was a huge fan of kind of the demo scene and, software houses like Bitmap Brothers, Team 17. Used to love Alistair Brimble, all his music, the Jesus on Ease, state-of-the-art demos, things like that. So they were like a huge influence for me. And getting an Amiga, I mean, to this day, I'm like a diehard Amiga fan. Mike's shrugging his shoulders next to me because he used to have an ST.
I'm all about Atari ST.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I can't listen to this. But yeah, carry on, Lee.
So he's just going to block his ears while I waffle on now. So yeah, I mean, the Amiga was kind of like that computer that came along and allowed people to get into music on a budget.
So did
basically.
the ST, actually.
Oh yeah. Just not as good.
That is interesting because, I mean, there's always been that rivalry, the ST and the Amiga. But actually, in terms of a musician's choice, I mean, the ST was generally, because of those MIDI ports, regarded as that. I mean, was there any reason that you preferred the Amiga over the ST for audio then?
It was, and I used an ST as well when I started working in a studio and doing some sort of later releases. But the thing with the ST is, yes, it had the MIDI ports, but in order to use the MIDI ports, you needed outboard gear. So you needed to buy yourself a sampler, a synthesizer, a mixing desk. And of course, when you start buying things like that, the costs just go up. You're looking at, I mean, back in the 90s, I remember paying nearly £800 for a sampler. So, with an Amiga, I mean, my Amiga, I ended up getting a reconditioned one for £200. So for £200, I could sample. I had 4 channels of audio that I could work with. I could sequence. And, for a 13, 14-year-old kid, buying a huge studio with a sampler and a synth is just, you can't do it. So that's why I kind of always favored the Amiga, because you could just write music in the box. It was a really creative computer. When you look at things like Apple and computers now, they're geared at sort of the industry, the creative industry. And the Amiga was kind of doing that years and years ago. It was the video toaster, all the graphics cards and the things you could do with it was just like amazing. So that's why I always favored the Amiga, just the price, being able to do it all in the box on one system, save on a disc, and just play it to your friends, and just loved it.
Did you ever release any kind of like mods on the demo scene or anything like that back then?
I didn't really get into the demo scene releasing stuff. I think I was a bit kind of too young at the time. But I did a few years later take a demo which I had written on the Amiga, and I took it into a record shop in town, a place called Movement Records, and I ended up getting a early record deal off the back of that. And I remember going into the studio, and the engineer there was sort of showing me how to use the sampler and everything. And he was like, "Oh, what did you write this on?" I told him the Amiga, and he was kind of, sort of really surprised that what you could get out of the Amiga. And we tried to recreate what I had written on the Amiga in this more expensive studio. And to be honest, we really struggled to kind of capture that sound and get the original vibe of that track. But, it's an amazing machine. And I do credit having an Amiga as a huge part of what I do now, because it enabled me to get started in music and understand production and sampling and things like that.
Well, Mike, I mean, you mentioned that you had, the ST when you were a kid, and kind of, I mean, we did kind of touch on your history in the industry, because I know you've worked in the industry for a long time. Last time we had you on, but it might be nice to have a little bit of a refresher for people that maybe, didn't hear the last interview. I mean, kind of give us your like history then. So, I mean, from the ST kind of getting into the gaming industry, where did that kind of go?
So my first job was as a QA tester at SCI, previously known as Storm, also known as Sales Curve Interactive. I think I got my job there purely on the purely because I brought in a PlayStation 1 memory card with my Ridge Racer times on. That was enough to convince them that this guy's serious about playing games. And from there, I very nearly quit in the first week because testing is a terrible job, actually. Playing the same game 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Even if it's a great game, you'll be sick of it in no time. And I was testing some pretty bad stuff, but I stuck with it, and luckily moved on to level design, and then ended up working in London with the London development studio of SCI. Luckily I eventually got headhunted and brought back to Eastleigh near Southampton, where I live. We were making a Dreamcast game then called Stampede. That was for Infogrames. And they put a lot of money into it, but sadly the project didn't quite happen, and eventually got cancelled. So the studio was in a difficult position, really. So we decided to go into making mobile games, some of the very first mobile games, in fact, for the likes of Nokia and Ericsson and Orange. So I think we made noughts and crosses, in fact, for Nokia. So you can imagine very, very simple, primitive games. And I've now moved on to Bitmap Bureau, where we're making retro games, I suppose, with a modern twist for not only for modern platforms, but also the retro stuff, such as the Sega Mega Drive, Neo Geo, Dreamcast, and there'll be a few more soon, I'm sure.
We talked to a lot of people that started in QA, and it's weird. I had a friend who worked for Sega doing quality testing, and they used to make him work night shifts and everything. I remember when he first started, his first week, he's like, "It's going to be the best job ever. I get to sit there, play games all night. They bring us free pizza and everything." It lasted about 3 nights, I think, before he quit.
Oh, really?
It's not quite the dream job people think it is it?
Oh, I can believe that. Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah, because I don't think anyone really sits there and plays a video game for 8 hours straight, even in your free time at the weekend. I might have done it as a teenager, but you do other stuff, and you might switch games. But to play a game for 8 hours straight is just horrible. And if it's a game you don't like, mentally it's just so demanding. So, but it kind of helps in a way, because you get so frustrated and annoyed with the game that you just want to break it. So you just invent new ways of entertaining yourself by just doing stupid stuff in the game. And actually, that's quite a good way of finding bugs. So I was quite an effective tester, but I just really wanted to get into the creative side of things. So I was lucky to eventually escape the test department.
And then they give you a free copy of the game that you've been playing every night at the end that you never open.
Exactly. I've got so many of them. Actually, there's some of them worth quite a bit now. But it's like the last thing you want. You've been playing this game for like a year, for 40 hours a week, and here's your reward at the end of it. Here's a sealed copy of Carmageddon or Kingdom of Magic or whatever it was. Actually, Carmageddon was cool. That was the best title I tested. But even after a year of that, it's like, oh,
you don't want to play it again. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant. Well, Lee, you've worked on some huge games and also some huge ad campaigns. How did you first get into the industry? Because of, like you say, you started initially as a DJ, on the Amigas and stuff. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, over the years, kind of releasing through sort of various labels, labels tend to pitch their music to ad companies and games companies, and sort of, if you're lucky, one of them will pick something up. So over the years, I've had a few placements in like the FIFA franchise, and in the early days, I had a track on Jet Set Radio, which
cool.
I was super chuffed about because the soundtrack on that is just nuts.
Is cool. Yeah,
it's crazy. It's
probably
so
the coolest
good.
game ever, right?
So that kind of happens that way. And then I remember at one point I was with a label and they pitched some music, and I ended up landing a track on an Apple iPod advert. And that was just, it was an amazing time. But they sort of tell you that it's in the running to be picked, so you kind of have this agonizing 6-week wait of, are they actually going to pick it? And I was constantly phoning up the label, annoying them and saying, what's the news, have you heard anything yet? And in the end, I think I kind of got down to the last two, and it was me and a Timbaland track of all people, if you remember Timbaland and Missy Elliott. So it was between me and him, and the story is, I don't know if this is true, but I'm going to believe it's true because it's a cool story, that Steve Jobs himself picked my track, and that's what they told me at the label. So I'm gonna go with that story and believe it and hope that it was true, because that's pretty cool.
I can just imagine him now, like, tell him Steve Jobs picked it. That'll keep him quiet.
That will stop him calling every day. Get rid of him.
I'm joking. That's awesome.
Yeah, in the end, they used my track, and then all of a sudden it was like, I think it was the second or third iPod. I don't know if you remember the iPod adverts where they were like completely sort of
silhouettes, wasn't it?
Yeah,
silhouettes with the colours.
They were iconic, weren't they?
So it was really cool, and it was a worldwide advert, so it was sort of played all over the world. And I did this really silly thing. So I'd actually sampled. This is quite a long story, but I sampled a band for this track. And we were a bit cheeky and we released it before. And then, of course, Apple picked it up. So then we had to go and tell the band that we'd sampled them. And, of course, then they were like, well, we want so-and-so %. Otherwise, we're not going to let you have it. So we ended up giving away quite a bit of the reroyalties and everything. But because it was sampled, they flew me out to LA and to re-record parts for the track. And I kind of went into the studio, and All Saints were in there, and Madonna was coming in next week. And during breaks of doing this re-recording, we would get on these bikes and we would ride around the beach, and it was just nuts. It was a crazy experience. And then I kind of came home to normal reality, and sort of everything was like back to work. And then a few weeks later, it started appearing on the TV, and I remember watching the Brit Awards. And it came on in the adverts, and sort of seeing it on TV, and a track that I'd written at home, sat in my mum's house in the back room.
On the Amiga?
Not on the Amiga, no. Not on the Amiga. on a proper studio by that point. Yeah, it's just like an amazing experience, and something that's really cool, and kind of like a special sort of time that I look back fondly of. So yeah, that was cool.
Because, you talk about those Apple commercials, the silhouette ones, and to me, they're probably the most iconic Apple commercials and the one that everyone remembers. And that kind of was around the time when the iPod became a bit of a cultural phenomenon, didn't it? It really felt like you got to that third or fourth gen of the iPod. Yeah. That's when mainstream people adopted it, and it suddenly changed the world. It must have been an exciting thing to be in the middle of all that.
It was. And, like I say, the whole waiting for the track to get picked, it was a real kind of agonizing time. But then when it happened, it was quite unbelievable. It kind of didn't sink in at first. And the deal we ended up getting, I remember going up back to the label was based in Brighton, and they'd they'd obviously asked for money and a fee and everything, but they'd also asked Apple for loads of computers and iPods. And they said to me, "Oh, what would you like?" And I didn't want to take the deal, and I didn't want to put Apple off. This is what I was thinking anyway. So I kind of just asked for a G5 Mac and an iPod. So I get that delivered. So I go down to the label to pick it up. I walk into their offices, and the entire office is covered in Mac laptops, iPods, desktop computers. And I remember just thinking at the time, I really wish I'd asked for more from them. But, you just didn't want to I didn't want to take the deal, and I didn't want them to be like, "Oh no, that you're asking for too much. This isn't going to happen," which they wouldn't have done. Apple are pretty rich.
Somebody else would be like, "Can I have 20 iPods? Can I have?"
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
And he says Mac G5s could heat your room in the winter as well. I remember
they
that.
do. Well, my G5 now is literally a stand for my hard drives underneath my desk.
Yeah.
And I just can't bring myself to get rid of it because of the memories from it and that experience. So it's just going to constantly stay under my desk now.
And Mike, I mean, you mentioned before about porting Xenocrisis to the Neo Geo, and I mean, we've talked about the Neo Geo quite a bit on this podcast in the past. I mean, to me, when I was at school, the Neo Geo was always kind of this mythical system that, a friend's cousin had one somewhere. Never got to play one. I read about them in magazines and everything. I mean, what kind of attracted you to porting it to the Neo Geo then, and what's kind of the story with doing that in the process?
Well, it's largely because Xenocrisis was initially a Mega Drive title, and the Neo Geo and Mega Drive share the same resolution, which is 320 by 224. So it just means that the art assets created by Henk can very easily be dropped onto a Neo Geo, and also the code is very similar as well. I didn't port the code myself, but I did write some of it. But my colleague Matt did all the heavy lifting there. It seemed like a logical thing to do. We were also approached by, I forget who it was, but someone suggested it to us. HP Man, yes, HP Man. There you go. So he's a bit of a legend in the Neo Geo dev community, and he got the ball rolling for us really. But beyond that, the Neo Geo is just an amazing system. It's a real 2D powerhouse, similar to the Saturn really, but just to get a game on the system's just awesome, really, and there's a real hardcore following. So as soon as we announced it, we had a lot of interest, and it's gone down very well. So and following that, it seemed logical to make another Neo Geo game, really, because we'd put all that effort into learning about the system and creating our own PCB and the cartridges and the boxes and so on. So that's how we moved from creating Xenocrisis to Final Vendetta.
And those PCBs and cartridges, I mean, they're massive on the Neo Geo. They can't be cheap things to make.
No, we've spent, I guess, tens of thousands really developing our own PCBs and perfecting the molds for the cases and the boxes. It's not for the faint-hearted, and I can see why there's very few people doing it. We had a lot of problems along the way. The initial PCB design seemed solid to start with, but upon testing, we found that it was resetting every so often. So we spent a lot of time and money perfecting the PCB. And even on launch, there were a couple of issues that were noticed on particular versions of the MVS system. So we had to go back and fix those as well. But now our PCB and our tech are very much refined, and so future Neo Geo releases shouldn't have any issues at all.
So just in terms of Final Vendetta, it's got a very Neo Geo look to it. I didn't realize it was coming to the Neo Geo as well. And it's got that really nice, obviously solid kind of 32-bit but 2D look to it. Was that kind of purposeful, from the ground up, with you knowing it was going to come out on the Neo Geo, or was it just kind of fell that way with the artwork?
No, that was absolutely what we were going for, really. We felt like the Neo Geo needed a new 2D beat 'em up because the previous efforts are a bit mediocre, such as Burning Fight and Mutation Nation, Sengoku. I mean, they've got their charms, but we thought we could do a better job. So yeah, we started looking for an artist that could create sprites in the SNK style, and
Yeah.
we've been looking for a long time. But yeah, luckily one day I stumbled on a Tumblr blog for this artist called Jabir Grant, he was doing sprite edits for various games, and I wasn't quite sure what he was doing. I wasn't sure how much of it, what I was seeing, was his own work, but actually he was creating sprites from scratch, very much in the SNK style. So he might take one of the characters from a Data East fighting game and then recreate it in SNK's style, or the King of Fighter style, for example.
Yeah.
And I was just blown away by his skill. And we asked him if he'd like to work with us and create some sprites for a fighting game, and he was very enthusiastic. Also very prolific as well. Incredibly, all of the sprite work in Final Vendetta is created by him. He's created all of the characters, thousands of frames of animation, and without him, the project just couldn't have happened. So we have to, we owe him one.
That's amazing.
But yeah, he's an amazing sprite artist, and some people just have a real knack for it. But yeah, there's very few people who can create sprites of that size with that many frames so prolifically. So,
I was going to say, it's very notable, the animation, the frame, that I don't know if the frame rate of the word is the right word for it, but the frames of animation is really, really beautiful. So no, really top work there.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to surpass Capcom and Streets of Rage 2 and 3. I mean, they were limited by memory, of course, to some extent. But yeah, we hope we've nailed that sort of classic Neo Geo look. Really, I think a lot of people are saying it's a sort of like, visually, it's like a crossover between Final Fight and King of Fighters, and so that's good. That's what we're going for, really. A very, very 90s beat 'em up. So that's really good to hear.
I watched a GameSack's review of it yesterday, and he summarized it as, I wish they'd just called it Streets of Final Fight or something like that.
Oh, what was it? The Final Vendetta of Rage. Or
yeah.
That's about right.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant. So, but you've also released games on the Dreamcast, like you say, the Mega Drive and stuff like that. Is there any other retro platforms you'd love to release a game on?
Speaking personally, the PlayStation 1 is probably my favourite machine of all time, just because of that crossover between great 2D games and also, early 3D games, really. I still think the PlayStation 1 games, the 3D stuff, holds up better than N64, for example. Yeah, it has a certain look to it. But also, I love the PC Engine and the Super Nintendo. They're slightly problematic because of the resolution that they run at. I think the SNES is 256 by 224. And the PC Engine's a bit weird as well. It doesn't match the Mega Drive, that's for sure. So it means that moving our games over to those systems, like Xenocrisis, for example, we get asked about that all the time. It would require so much reworking on the art and code that it would just be too big a project for us. And even then, we're not sure that, in terms of the processor, we're not sure the SNES and the PC Engine can hold up. But yeah, so I'm hoping, maybe one day it could happen. Yeah, my colleague he's busy working on, let's say, some other ports. So yeah, we should have something to announce soon on that front. So yeah, we are looking at other machines. Let's say that,
and of course the Amiga.
The Amiga, Atari ST first, mate. I'm sorry.
There does seem to be a lot of new Amiga games coming out recently, though. We've been covering quite a lot of them. It does seem to be, I think there's a couple of beat-em-ups that are coming out on there.
Yeah, is it Metro City Brawl?
Metro Siege.
Yeah, we had them on.
That's it. Yeah.
I wonder whether you could get Xenocrisis onto the Amiga.
Matt?
There's a challenge.
We've got our colleague Matt in the background. Well, they share the same processor, don't they? The Motorola 68000 and the same screen resolution. I think the biggest issue is the memory, which is squeezing all the graphics into the Amiga's memory. So I don't know. It would certainly be a challenge, but I think given Henk's link with the Amiga, I think it would be perfectly suited to it if it could happen. But not easy undertakings, but maybe one day we'll see.
I think Matt could do it in an afternoon.
Oh,
Matt, get on it now. He's already
Before we finish
started
this
it.
interview.
He's in the way.
Well, Lee, I mean, how did you get involved with Bitmap Bureau then? So you mentioned that you're just down the road. I mean, what's kind of your background with meeting these guys and getting involved in the project?
Yeah, so that was kind of totally random. My wife actually rented an office next door to them, and she sort of came home one day and was like, "Oh, there's these guys next door,
Nerds.
these nerds next door. They make, I think she said at the time, they make games for mobile phones," because she didn't really know any, wasn't too aware of what they were doing. And then one day, my wife said to me, "Oh, can Matt and Mike come down and listen to a vinyl that they've just pressed up?" And this turned out to be the Xenocrisis vinyl, and they just got the test presses back, which is where they send you an early copy to make sure it plays okay and everything's fine. And of course, they didn't have a turntable or a record player, so they came down to the studio and had a listen to it, and we sort of got chatting. And I started going on about the Amiga again to Mike and just chatting about like what we sort of grew up with games wise, and just seemed to sort of get on. And I mean, at the time, I remember Mike or Matt saying, "Oh, we're thinking of starting a beat 'em up and we should get you to do the music." And kind of at the time, I thought, "Oh, yeah, that's, just say that sort of thing," but it probably wouldn't happen. And then I think it was only a few months later, one of you sort of made a start on it, and they were like, "Yeah, come and do the soundtrack." So I was like super excited about that and was like, "Yeah, I'm definitely up for that." So I kind of made a start on that before seeing any artwork, which was a bit of a mistake because I kind of got a bit too enthusiastic about the whole project and just started writing music from the off. But as you kind of start getting the artwork in and you see the game develop, you realize that certain tracks don't really work or don't feel right with the levels. So I kind of scrapped a lot of the first rough ideas that I made. I mean, at home now, the soundtrack is 30 tracks. And then if you buy the Super Collector's Edition, there's another 4 bonus tracks. And then at home, I've probably got another 15 tracks. So there was a lot of music written for the game, which was good because it enabled us to pick the best tracks out of the bunch. But yeah, we kind of started that, and then sort of in between working on that, they started Battle Axe, and the guys asked me if I'd like to do the sound effects for that, which I'd never done before, and I just sort of said, "Yep, I'll do that." And then was like, "How do I do this?" And just sort of watched some videos, and I've been writing music for a long time, and I'm familiar with audio, but doing a certain job for a certain game, and something that I've never done before, I was a bit kind of, "Oh, can I do that?" But I think it turned out all right, and the guys were happy with the sounds. And then I jumped back into Vendetta, carried on with the soundtrack, did the sound effects for that as well. And ever since then, they can't get rid of me, and I just come up to their office every day and bug them.
You're not even on the payroll. You just turn up.
Yeah, I just turn up, and so if there's any games that come out late and don't meet schedules, that's because of me hanging around and stopping them working.
Fantastic. Was there any games you kind of looked back to? Like, obviously Streets of Rage has got such an iconic soundtrack to it. Was there any kind of, like, when you were doing these soundtracks, did you go and study a lot of these games, or were you a big fan of these games as a child and you just thought, "You know what, I know exactly what I'm doing here"?
Yeah, hugely. So obviously Streets of Rage 2's the kind of blueprint for this type game. So
yeah,
I mean, when I heard that, around the sort of Amiga days as well, those soundtracks were just huge for me. And it was a massive influence. And also later games like the Wipeout soundtrack, going back to Jet Set Radio, that was a huge influence as well. I really liked soundtracks that really had their own character. And in my words, don't sound video game-ish, which is what I mean by that. Is that a word? Yeah, I don't know. What I mean is kind of your traditional kind of synth leads and melodies and everything. Whereas when Streets of Rage came along and Streets of Rage 2, it was like the music that was in the clubs and what was on the radio, but in chip form. And that was like, mind blowing at the time. And then, of course, the evolution of that, you start getting into Wipeout, and when they start licensing real music. Sorry, I don't mean real music as in, to disrespect video game music, because that's not what I mean by that, but just licensing tracks from current artists.
Yeah.
And like with Jet Set Radio, that was a soundtrack that it was obviously really inspired by the kind of big beat era, the kind of Norman Cooks, the Chemical Brothers. I mean, when I listen to that soundtrack, I can totally hear that influence all over that. So I really liked when that evolution of video game soundtracks kind of crossed over and started to really experiment and in my eyes get more interesting. So yeah, I took influence from all of those soundtracks. I think, what was the other one?
Rez is a good one. Rez has got
Rez, Street Fighter 3.
Yeah.
Was it for? Yeah, that was
really went for it with that soundtrack. Yeah, real departure from Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter Alpha.
Yeah,
much more. I mean, you got hip hop, jungle.
That's it. Yeah,
that's it.
That's all you need.
Yeah, that's it. But I mean, also for me personally, because we were making a game that was nostalgic, it was all set in the 90s. It was UK. For me, it was really important to embrace that era. So in my mind, I kind of set boundaries of like, okay, I want music to be. I want the years of sort of 1992 up to 1998 to be really big influence for me. And the music that was big in that era was kind of like, jungle, drum and bass, big beat, breakbeat, hip hop, house, techno.
Hold on, where's the happy hardcore? We
didn't put happy hardcore. We didn't put happy hardcore. No, we got some Gabba.
Your bonkers CDs.
DLC happy hardcore.
Okay. What else do we have? Gabba in there, and I just wanted to kind of embrace that kind of decade of music, and I thought, this is the perfect opportunity to get that in. It would add to the kind of nostalgic feel and the authenticity, just the overall feel of the game. It would work really well with it.
Well, all of these games, have got like a backstory, much of which we didn't really pay much attention to as kids, but it's always in there. I mean, this game being like a love letter to those 90s side-scrolling beat-em-ups, Mike. I mean, tell us a bit about Final Vendetta's story then. When is it set? Where is it set? And who are the characters then in the game?
Oh, man.
It went for about 10 rewrites, didn't it, that storyline?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, I had a go, but I'm no writer at all, really. So I was lucky enough that I know a games journalist, and he's also a developer himself, called Brandon Sheffield. So he took over the writing duties for me, which I'm very thankful for. But it's just a classic setup, really, where the local gang have kidnapped this girl's sister, so Claire Sparks, her name is. Yeah, unfortunately for the gang, Claire's a bit of a martial arts expert, and she's got two badass friends, Miller and Duke, who are going to help her out. So yeah, it's traditional kind of video game storyline, really. Yeah, very much in the vein of Final Fight and Streets of Rage, I guess. I mean, the storyline is almost secondary, really. It's just an excuse to go and beat up bad guys to some really good tunes.
And there seems to have been like a real retro beat 'em up revival, recently, Streets of Rage 4, Shredder's Revenge also this week, and now obviously, Final Vendetta. What do you think draws people to these games? Why do you think people still love this style of game?
Yeah, they sort of went off the radar for a long time, really. And yeah, it was largely Streets of Rage 4 that's brought them back into the limelight. I mean, I think they disappeared largely because of Street Fighter 2. I mean, Capcom were very much focused on scrolling beat-em-ups for most of the 90s, along with Konami and Sega. But yeah, when Street Fighter 2 dropped, there was a massive gold rush almost towards versus fighters. Yeah, that's why there's a dearth of beat-em-ups on Neo Geo as well. So I think Dotemu, they're very savvy. They know a good license when they see one, and they realised that I think there was a big gap in the market for a great beat 'em up. So they brought back the Streets of Rage franchise, and yeah, and everyone's like, actually, yeah, beat 'em ups are pretty cool, and we want more of them. So I think this year alone, there's something like 22 beat 'em ups coming out, or something crazy like that.
Oh wow!
So yeah,
21 of them are the Turtles compilation coming out. At the end of the year.
But it's really cool to be part of this renaissance, and
Yeah.
I've just avoided playing any other beat 'em ups. Really, I've tried to just go in my own direction. It's very much a love letter to Final Fight and Streets of Rage, but with some extra touches, which I hope fans of the genre will find interesting. But yeah, I think great games are timeless, really. So I've played Streets of Rage 1 and 2 with my daughter and Golden Axe, and we have a great time with them. And these games are, 25, 30 years old now.
Yeah.
I think it goes for any genre, whether it's a Metroidvania or a puzzle game, a shoot 'em up. Great game mechanics. They don't need to be transferred to 3D and ultra high production values. There's still a real demand for great 2D games, and I think there always will be. And actually, the beat 'em up, for me, it doesn't work in 3D. A few people have attempted it. But yeah, it's just one of those genres, along with probably the Metroidvania, which just functions better in 2D.
100%. And, those two genres are probably two of my favorite genres of all time. So I love it whenever these games come out. And, you mentioned they're playing it with your daughter. Our next question was, how important is it to you to keep these games multiplayer? Because it's not something you really see couch co-op anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think beat 'em ups, probably of all genres, they're just so much fun with someone else sat next to you. And we did look at the potential of a 3 or 4 player, but given the size of the sprites, it was just unfeasible, really. It was just too busy. But yeah, I mean, a great 2-player beat 'em up, they just work well. Like I said, Streets of Rage 1 and 2 still stand up now. Alien Storm, Golden Axe. So, it's just one of those genres which lends itself to being played with a friend, and if you're lucky enough to have someone around to play with, it just enhances the experience.
Well, Lee, I mean, kind of getting back to the soundtrack, I know you're friends with dance music legends, the Utah Saints, who, thanks to you, we had on the podcast actually a couple of years ago. You hooked us up with that very kindly, and they've obviously been ingrained in the technology and video game scene for a good couple of decades now as well. I mean, what's kind of your relationship with them, and how did you hook up with them originally? And are they involved in this project? Have you roped them into it?
Yes. Basically, when I was DJing sort of in my earlier days, we used to get Tim to come to Southampton and play in a place called Orange Rooms, and he would sort of come every other Friday and play some gigs. So I kind of got to know him there, and that was a bit strange because, like, as a kid, I would go in and buy their records. I remember going into Woolworths when I was like 12 or 13 and picking up their first sort of releases. And then, how many years later I'm there DJing alongside him. And it was just a bit of wow, that's crazy. But the thing is with Tim and Jez, they're like, I mean, to this day, they're probably two of the nicest people I've met in the music industry. They're just so down to earth. The stuff they've done in the beginning was, as far as I'm concerned, real pioneering. And, they were kind of with that, the sort of leaders of the electronic kind of movement that did really well in the charts. People like them and KLF and a few others were kind of like the people that I always remember sort of pushing dance music to the masses and getting on top of the pops, but their music was still really good.
Did they use an Atari ST?
They used an Atari ST. They did use an Atari ST.
Clear that up.
Yeah. So they wrote good music on the Atari ST. And so I kind of got to know them through then. And as my DJ career sort of grew, they would book me for shows. And then I ended up playing Beat Herder Festival, which is a festival that they sort of put together the stage up there for one of the stages, a stage called The Ring. And I remember playing a few times for them alongside people like DJ Hype and High Contrast, all these really cool artists. And they would always just give me like amazing time slots and just be like super nice. And then they got involved with the game partly because of the show. As you know, I obviously sort of emailed you, Dan, and sort of said, "Oh, would you like to get these guys on? You were interested in sort of having them on." And sort of, I didn't realize the depth of their involvement in the game industry until I heard that podcast that you put out. And it kind of made me think, we were sort of halfway through doing Vendetta at the time, and the soundtrack was coming together, and it had a feel and a sound and a direction. And I kind of sort of listened to the podcast that you did with them. And I was like, oh, wow, Tim's done an awful lot. I've never sort of chatted to him about that side of things. And then it just sort of clicked and was like, oh, well, we should get them on Final Vendetta, because this is, a 90s game. You don't get more bigger than Utah Saints in the 90s. That was their era. And it just kind of made sense to get them involved. So I sort of said to Mike and Matt, would you like to get Utah Saints on? And they were like, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, let's get them on.
Wow.
And originally we were just going to get them to do the title music. So when the game starts up and you got the player 1, player 2 options, that was going to be where their music was. But by this time, we'd kind of had this rough demo that we had in the game. Mike had put it in the game. And when you hear something over and over, you really get used to it being there. And I think kind of taking it out of the game at that point would have, I think it would have been a bad move. So what we then ended up deciding was sort of let them do and score an entire level. So they ended up doing the docks level, and they also did the boss for the docks level. So they had those 2 tracks done. And then I was kind of listening to their first album one night, and there was a track on there. I can't remember which one it's called, but it's quite a chilled, laid back track. And I just remember thinking, oh, that would be really good for the end of the game, the end credits. So I sort of said to Tim, do you want to do another track? Can you do something like you did with this track you did on your first album? So they wrote that. And then we were kind of like, okay, well, let's get them to do one more. And they can then become more of a feature of the game rather than having just 1 or 2 tracks. They can sort of be, sort of have a bigger percentage of the soundtrack, and it would be more of a feature and more of a special appearance type thing. So they ended up doing the 4 tracks for the game. And then we also, I got a track from Crafty Cuts, who's a DJ that's been going for years, and he donated a track for the bonus level. And it kind of went from there. And it just kind of fitted the whole feel of the game, and having their name on there, just, it brings back a lot of memories and a lot of nostalgia for people. So yeah, it just worked really well, I think.
Yeah, and I think the soundtrack complements the gameplay and the era so well. Are you releasing is the soundtrack available separately from the game then?
Well, you can get it. You can get it on the special edition and the collector's.
I think it's the collector's edition and the super limited edition.
Yeah, so they come with the CD, but it will be appearing on streaming sites hopefully within the next week, and then we are looking at putting it out on vinyl in a few months' time.
So, Mike, the game obviously came out over the weekend. What's the initial reaction been like?
Actually, surprisingly good. I get really nervous whenever I release a game, because I spend generally about 2 years on the game, and you put it out there and you just hope that some people will find enjoyment in it. So yeah, I was quite surprised actually. I usually expect the worst and hope for the best, but we had really good feedback. I think the classic beat 'em up fans, they just love it and they totally get it. There's been quite a few people who find the game just too hard, and yeah, I totally understand that. It's a game that you have to learn. It's something of a thinking person's beat 'em up, I would say. So I've tried to make it a bit more intelligent than Final Fight and Streets of Rage. You have to very carefully plan your attacks and your movements. So yeah, it will, when you go in straight away cold, it will probably catch you by surprise. But yeah, I mean, I have to appreciate that there's a lot of gamers out there who, they don't really want that challenge. They want a more relaxed playthrough. So this in the last day or two, I've been working on a casual setting for the game, so players can just continue indefinitely and just play the game as they like. So hopefully that will keep the more casual players and younger players happy. But yeah, we've been really blown away. Obviously, I don't know, some people would say unfortunate, but I would say fortunate enough to launch alongside Shredder's Revenge, which, you know, certainly wasn't planned on our side. And I think if anything, I don't know, it seems weird that they launched the day before us. So I don't know if that's coincidence or what, but
Final Vendetta was announced 4 months before, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Date. Yeah. So, but no, it's cool. If anything, we've been sort of tagged along with the hype to some extent. You know, we've been constantly compared to Shredder's Revenge, and I think players realise that we offer quite a different experience. Shredder's Revenge, obviously a fantastic game, but it's I think it's probably a bit more a bit softer than Final Vendetta. Let's say we're very much in the 90s camp, really. Yeah, it takes its inspiration from Final Fight and Streets of Rage, and Shredder's Revenge is more weapon-based combat. So yeah, I think we're two quite different camps, really. But it's nice to be compared to it, and we've had a lot of nice comments saying, actually, yeah, I really get what you guys are doing with Final Vendetta. So it's gone surprisingly well, and Twitter and Twitch and YouTube has just been crazy over the last few days. I've barely had time to do any real work. I've just been replying to people on social media and getting involved with Twitch streams and all sorts, really.
I think that timing of coming out alongside Shredder's Revenge, as accidental as it was, I think, in the amount of people I've seen on Twitter, and, we've been tagged in lots from our listeners as well. And Joe and I did it as well. We both had like a retro beat-em-up weekend. Yeah. I stayed up on Friday night playing Shredder's Revenge, Saturday night playing Final Vendetta. So I think a lot of people, it looks like, did that over the weekend. So the timing probably worked out well.
I was literally playing Final Vendetta, lying on the couch, playing it on Switch while my wife watched RuPaul's Drag Race last night. And then we went on Shredder's Revenge together, and I was like, oh God, this feels so much different now. And she went, what, in a bad way? Like, as if, like, she thought I preferred Final Vendetta. And I was like, no, they feel like, even though they're both beat-em-ups, they feel completely different. Like, no offense to Shredder's Revenge, because I'm enjoying that game as well, but I didn't have to think when I was playing that. I was just playing it, whereas Final Vendetta, really got to think about it, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And I've really, like I said earlier, I've avoided playing the likes of Streets of Rage 4 and other modern beat-em-ups like Fight and Rage. I understand is a great game as well, but yeah, I do that deliberately to just try and formulate my own sort of take on the genre. And yeah, I think a lot of players really enjoy and get what we're doing. And of course, with it being a Neo Geo title, it has to have a certain feel to it, I think, and a certain level of difficulty. And yeah, I think we've pulled that off. And the comparisons with Shredder's Revenge are usually quite flattering, yeah.
Well, the game is out there now, obviously available on all the major platforms, and it's incredible to see that it's doing so well. I know that Mikey probably still on a total high, like you said, and kind of, just catching up on everything, but have you got plans for your next game then? I mean, what's kind of in the pipeline for Bitmap Bureau?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, things don't stop here, really. You kind of, even before I've finished Final Vendetta, I've been working on our next title, which is absolutely huge. And we've been approached by a great publisher to create a game. How much can I say, Lee?
Not much, I don't think.
a game.
I think you can tell us everything, personally.
Give me a few drinks and we'll talk about it. No, what can I say? It's a game based on a big...
I don't know if you can say that.
No, I can't
you can't say
that. That's it.
It's going to be a big game.
A game based on a big. There you go.
Oh, wow.
A big what? I'll leave that to your imagination. No, it's really exciting for us and a real honour to be involved with this project. And yeah, it brings with it a lot of pressure, but also potential. And yeah, it's right up our street. And again, Lee's working with us. He's writing the music for this game,
which
I
again
can't talk about.
You can't talk about, but it's a dream come true for me. So it's going to be a big game and a big game for Bitmap Bureau, I think. So.
Yeah.
Wonderful, guys. Well, we'll have to get you back on when you can talk about it to tell us more when you can. But in the meantime, I mean, everyone needs to go and play Final Vendetta, if they haven't bought it yet. perfect for the weekend to play. So obviously I'll link up all the details in our show notes as well. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you guys, so thank you so much for coming on and sharing a few of your stories about the game.
Nice one. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys.
Underground.